So I've been playing a lot of beta testing all the tanks, and I figured I'd make this video going over how all the hero talent trees felt to play. This isn't to compare their power whatsoever, it'll mostly just be about the playstyle of each hero talent tree and how fun, cool, or satisfying it is to play. Starting off with Death Knight. Deathbringer's really fun to play and is super thematic. It's my favorite hero talent tree currently. You get an ability called Reaper's Mark that you apply on a mob, and that gives you Exterminate procs. Exterminate makes your next Mararen do an awesome blue scythe attack. These exterminates actually live up to its name, and it's super satisfying with the sound animation and the damage it does. There's a little RNG element to this where you can proc more Reaper marks on the target with Exterminate, which means you can get back-to-back big Exterminate hits. Sometimes I've gotten like up to 6 Exterminate hits in a row, and it's actually very satisfying to press. Your Blood Boil becomes a blue Shadow Frost ability, which is kind of neat, and your Blood Plagues actually hit for a lot more damage. The biggest gripe I have with Deathbringer, however, is Reaper's Mark does add another GCD to Blood Decay's already bloated opener. Now for the Sand Lane tree, it plays largely like old Blood Decay except faster paced, and I actually like it a lot. The haste makes you feel like you're playing a later expansion DK, like a later patch DK with fast GCDs and tons of resources. Vampiric Blood also becomes a damage cooldown that you want to basically press on cooldown, and during Vampiric Blood you ideally want to be mashing your Heart Strike, which becomes Vampiric Strikes, and Vampiric Strike actually has a completely different sound effect, making it super satisfying to play. I've always disliked how Heart Strike sounds, but that's just like a small gripe of mine. Overall, I love them both. I do think Sand Lane is a little bit more bland. I wish it had more visuals or something more noticeable outside of Vampiric Strikes. Could have been something simple, like whenever you press Vampiric Blood and your character just like starts glowing red with blood or some type of aura around it. And in terms of how I feel, Deathbringer is a little bit more of like a heftier, chunky feel. It's a little bit different rotationally, and it's a lot easier to manage your bone shields. Sand Lane's more of like a smooth, spammy gameplay. There's a whole lot more mashing your Heart Strikes and Death Strikes. Probably feels a little bit closer to what DK has felt like in Shadowlands Season 3 and 4 with the whole Heart Strike spam gameplay from the tier set. Guardian Druid hero talent trees. Luna's Chosen pretty much plays like same old bear tank with lots of spamming Iron Fur, Mangle, Thrash, and the raise procs whenever you get them, but Moonfire does replace Swipe entirely now. You just want to be Moonfiring whenever you're not pressing one of those cooldown abilities. And you get Lunar Beam as a pretty powerful defensive and offensive CD on a really short CD too. The gameplay is super smooth, it's got a lot of rage generation, and yeah, it's just a very spammy playstyle. Not a whole lot of really changes for Luna's Chosen. It is the same old bear tank that everyone loves. Then there's Druid of the Claw. It's largely the same playstyle, but it's a lot more actively looking out for Ravage procs. You don't spam your Iron Fur as much because you don't have as much rage generation, and you do want to save some rage for Ravage procs. It promotes a bigger bursty window during Incarn, because during Incarn you're getting a ton of Ravage procs, and you're able to just like do every other global Ravage sometimes for a crazy amount of damage. And there is cat weaving, but I feel like you will rarely use it because it's not worth it in AoE, and it can be dangerous in higher levels of keys or just whenever you're doing more challenging content. But outside of that, it's really neat for easier content. Cat weaving now is basically 3 globals that you're occasionally pressing, which is Rake, Rip, and then Mangle in that order. And you no longer need to actually press your shapeshift forms since you auto shift with fluid form talented. I do like both of them, but Druid of the Claw can be very frustrating to play when you're not getting procs. It does add a RNG element where you can go for like 20 globals where you just don't get a Ravage proc, and it just feels really bad. Also, it benefits massively from having a Shaman raid buff in your group, because Sky Fury buff now does give 20% more attack speed, which means you're proccing Ravage more. Personally, I would have wished they leaned heavily into cat weaving and made it an actual defensive gain and actually worth using an AoE. Just like something that promotes using cat abilities, or just like making it so that you can actually tank packs while in cat form. But as it is, Druid of the Claw, not very much of a shapeshifter. So, Warrior's Mountain Fane hero talent tree. It's super fun, super smooth. It's a very spammy playstyle. It's got crazy amounts of rage generation, which leads to a lot of ignore pain pressing and plenty of leftover rage for revenge whenever Shield Slam and Thunderclap are on cooldown. With Mountain Thing, your Thunderclaps becomes Thunder Blast, and Thunder Blast is crazy cool to press with the new animation and sound effects it adds. It also does a ton of damage and procs a lot. Avatar grants you 2 charges of Thunder Blast when used, and it resets the cooldown on Thunderclap. This means Demo Shouts and Avatars come back way more often because of the extra rage generation and Thunderclaps being pressed, and this leads to even more Thunder Blast and rage generation. Overall, it's a great gameplay loop, and it's super satisfying, and it plays very much like BFA Warrior, where you just you're resetting the cooldown on your Avatar and Demo Shout, and then that leads to more Thunder Blast, and it's just a back and forth gameplay loop. Colossus, on the other hand, it is big, fat, chunky hits. Everything hits big and hard. Demolish is a new ability you get that does a ton of damage and applies a debuff, making the enemies take up to 20% more damage, giving you a bit of a burst window. Revenge and Execute also do big damage now with this talent tree, which feels super satisfying, but it's also scary when you're not keeping up Ignore Pain. Rage gen is significantly less, and there are some occasional downtime in rotation. Feels a lot more like the older school gameplay, where your buttons feel meaningful. Overall, both are fun, and I do lean towards Mountain Thane because I am more used to the more modern playstyle of just mashing your buttons. However, I do love how satisfying Colossus is, especially on bosses that have a damage amp window where you can really feel the big hits. Also, Demolish does have a really cool animation, I forgot to mention that. They've actually really hit the theme on both hero talents for Warrior. Paladins, they get Lightsmith, which plays very much the same, but has some cool support capabilities with the new ability Holy Bulwark that allows you to shield a certain player and yourself. They also get Sacred Weapon, which is a bit bland, but it's a nice extra damage cooldown, and that's about it. There's no new visuals or anything, it's just an ability that shields you and an ally, or you do a little bit more damage. Then there's Templar. Templar's got a super cool new ability tied to Eye of Tyr called Hammer of Light. After using Eye of Tyr, you get Hammer of Light, and this drops a bunch of hammers on the heads of the enemy. It feels very chunky and does big damage during cooldowns. It's got a super cool animation, but honestly doesn't feel that satisfying to press because of how it costs 2 global cooldowns and doesn't generate any holy power with these globals. Overall, I don't really like the Paladin hero trees too much. Both are potentially really cool and they sound really cool, but aren't as interesting to play gameplay wise. Personally, I wish they would have doubled down on the Lightsmith being supporty and maybe a bit more of a healing playstyle. Something in between a Holy Paladin and a Prop Paladin. I've always seen Prop Paladins as the support tank, and that being their class fantasy compared to other tank specs, so doubling down on that would have been awesome. Conversely, making Templar more of a bursty heavy damage and focusing on the damage reduction side, like a plate armored Crusader imbued with the protection of light marching in, would have been awesome. Templar also plays kinda clunky. Hammer of Light being tied to Eye of Tyr sucks and should add to your holy power instead of consuming it. Eye of Tyr being off the GCD would have also helped with reducing this clunkiness, at least if they made it off the GCD for Templar. Right now the opener is a bit heavy on GCDs between Divine Toll, Eye of Tyr, and Hammer of Light. For Demon Hunters, they get Felsguard. This makes Demon Hunter feel very much like a DPS. You have small burst damage windows with Feldev and big burst windows with Meta. It's actually super tanky whenever meta's up too because you can have a really long meta window. You basically feel like a god during meta. So the way it plays is, it's got a very Havoc Demon Hunter-like opener. When you press Feldev, you can spend 2 of your Demon Surge procs by pressing Soul Cleave and Spirit Bomb. That does a ton of damage with Demon Surges. And then you can press Meta to reset your Feldev, and it becomes a new ability. And you can spend 5 Demon Surges during your meta with Soul Cleave, Spirit Bomb, and Immorora becomes another ability that can spend a Demon Surge proc. Sigil of Flame becomes Sigil of Doom, and Feldev becomes something else that you can just press for another Demon Surge proc. And then after that is over, you get your Feldev back. So you can actually be in meta for a very long time. During meta, you just want to be dumping as many Soul Cleaves as possible. It's a very fitting and actually pretty awesome hero tree. My biggest gripe with this hero tree is how it requires a lot of front-loading defensives, and it's sucks if you ever have to hold your defensives. If you want to maximize your damage, you do have to have Firebrand and meta up at the same time, but that is really not ideal for staying alive to just stack your biggest defensives. Valdraki Reaver Hero Talent Tree. This one's kind of bland and uninteresting. There is one talent I do like on this tree though, and it's the one that lets you use Eventual Retreat twice in a row. This is my favorite Demon Hunter ability, and I wish it was just baseline to be able to do this. So the way Valdraki plays is you get a Throwglaive proc every 20 souls consumed, or by pressing the hunt, and when you press your glaive it consumes the proc, which empowers your soul cleave and fracture. And all this does is it does a big damage on your prior target, and it debuffs them with Reaver's Mark, makes them take additional damage. In short, you have small burst windows every time you consume your glaive proc, and the hunt is more of a meaningful cooldown. Nothing really too different from normal gameplay wise. Overall, I do prefer what they've done with Fellsguard. I wish it wasn't so heavily tied to Fiery Band though, because you are incentivized to use both brand and meta for damage. Both builds also prioritize Soul Cleave a little too heavily, which diminishes Spirit Bomb. Personally, I prefer when Spirit Bomb is the main ability and Soul Cleave is used to dump Fury. So, Valdraki Warriors, they do use War Blades that were made of strange material with unique properties to consume the souls of the enemy. I would have preferred if Valdraki Reaver leaned more into soul consumption and generation, while altering the effects of Demon Hunter's non-fire abilities in a much more interesting way. The idea of Fellsguard being the explosive fiery demon spec that utilizes Spirit Bomb, and Valdraki Reaver being an ancient warrior that consumes souls and has a different playstyle from the usual Spirit Bomb rotation would have been much more interesting and awesome. Monks get Shadow Pan. This is probably the least interesting hero talent I know of. There are zero visual changes and no gameplay differences from normal. It does offer some nice passives though. Vivify heals for a lot in this build, giving monks their own sort of Word of Glory. Keg Smashes are big and chunky and combos really well with the Season 1 tier set that gives Keg Smash resets. Aside from that, passively, you're supposed to just be a beast, I guess, which is kind of the idea behind Shadowpan. On the other end, there's Master of Harmony. This adds an extra Celestial Brew charge and gives you bigger Purifying Brews. There's also a new mechanic called Vitality, where you can store Vitality from just doing damage, healing, and Purifying Brew. You consume this Vitality with Celestial Brew to do more damage, making Celestial Brew a bit of a damage cooldown. It's kind of neat, but doesn't really feel noticeable. This doesn't really change up your gameplay a whole lot, but there are some nuances. There are a lot of little min-maxing things you can do, like buffing up for a massive exploding keg and not capping on Vitality. Master of Harmony also makes Tiger Palm a lot more worth pressing over Spinning Crane Cake, so you can opt out of Spinning Crane Cake completely. The extra Celestial Brew alone actually makes it a lot smoother to play Brewmaster. This lets you build up Purified Chi stacks while recharging one on cooldown. Like you could just go into a poll and just send one on CD. Overall, I'm not the biggest fan of monk talent trees or hero talent trees, but monks are already pretty nice to play, and these do offer a bit of an extra addition to their current gameplay. Both trees also make Chi Burst a big damage button. It would have also been nice if they made Chi Burst an instant cast, because it does feel pretty strange to be casting Chi Burst as a tank. That about sums up what my experience has been with each of these hero talent trees. Some of them are awesome and bring a lot of fun and flavor to their gameplay, while some are not as exciting or interesting. Hopefully this gives you guys a better idea of how each hero talent plays. Anyways, that is it for the video. Thank you all very much for watching. Also, subscribe if you guys are looking for more content in the near future.